Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name's Jane Crouch. I'm Vnpa's fundraising manager. You've been hearing very beautiful cello music from Xiao Xiao. Xiao volunteered with the Vnpa for 3 months this year as part of our student placement program, working on our grasslands program. And she's also a very talented musician, as you've heard, and a music teacher. Xiao's been so highly engaged with grasslands and is so multi-talented, she's performed for us this evening 2 original compositions. One was about the wildflowers in the grasslands, and the second piece was about the sun. Please join me in giving a big thanks to Xiao for sharing her beautiful music with us this evening. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you to the Victorian National Parks Association's 72nd Annual General Meeting. Long before I was born, the organisation started, and many of you. Thank you so much for joining us. We're very pleased to be celebrating 72 years of protecting nature together and glad to be seeing so many of you in person. And a very special welcome to those of you who are joining us online on Zoom. Some very quick housekeeping messages for those here in person. Could you please kindly turn your phones off to silent, or off or to silent? There's 2 sets of bathrooms here, some that you passed on the way in on your left, just off the foyer. And there's another set of bathrooms that can be accessed just over that way, at the back of the seating area, just there. Has been a warm day. Should you require, there's jugs of water and paper cups just up at the back there. Sorry we weren't able to bring in the glasses and all that yummy food. For those joining us online, sadly we can't see or hear you, but you can ask questions in the Q&A, and you're being ably looked after by Jessie and Jacob in our control booth. So I'd like to acknowledge that we are here meeting on Wiradjuri land, and I welcome Wiradjuri man, Thane Garvey, who's going to welcome us to country.
So I'll fix that. Oh, there we go. How's that? Awesome. I guess I'd just like to start off by again introducing myself to everyone here. My name's Thane Garvey and I've worked for Wiradjuri Tribal Land Corporation now for about 13 years, but more importantly, I'm here representing the Wandin family of the Wiradjuri tribe. Down here we only have 3 surviving families, and so it's so important to acknowledge them 3 surviving families. But more importantly also, it's so important to acknowledge all the families we lost and clan groups we lost as well. With that being said, I'd also like to pay respects to my ancestors and my elders past and present, but I'd also like to take the time to pay respects and acknowledge everyone else here today as well. I'd also like to pay respects to the 6 tribes that make up Kulin Nations. And so down here we have Wathaurong to the west, we have Dja Dja Wurrung to the northwest, we have Nurra Ilum directly north, we have Tanarong to the northeast, and then we have Bunurong that wraps around all the way down to the south there. And so Wiradjuri, or Wiradjuri as you've probably heard it be pronounced, is pretty much based right in the centre of these 5 amazing tribes, and our boundaries stretch from the Wiradjuri River up to Mount Baw, across the Great Dividing Ranges and all the way back down to Mordialloc Creek on the other side. Our almighty creator and totem is Bunjil the Wedge-tailed Eagle, and Bunjil is the creator spirit of Kulin, and one day I'd like to watch over my people with Bunjil and my ancestors when our spirits cross over from one life form to another. It's so important as the people that exist on country to have a connection to country and to have a relationship with country. And Indigenous people all over this continent have been doing that in such a sustainable way for thousands of generations, because we've always cared for these lands in the same way you might care for a family member or the same way you might care for someone you love. And in return, that land's always given us an opportunity to have a life where everything's treated as equally as important and nothing's ever exploited. It's a life of peace, and it's a life that we've always liked to refer to as a life of dream time. I personally Love doing all the work that I've got to do, engaging with community, culture, and just making sure that we get the recognition that we deserve as the traditional custodians of this land, because no matter how dark the recent history is here in Australia for Indigenous people, no matter how dark that recent history is, there is still no limit to how far reconciliation can go if it's done the right way. And there's no limit to the love or the kindness that we can show other people. I also believe that this will become a much brighter and safer country for us all as we start to embrace our different cultures and indifferences in general. And so with that being said, I just want to say a few words in my mother tongue, my Woiwurrung language. Wiradjuri, Womanjiga, Mbalu, Yimi, Kundibik, Womanjiga Balak, Womanjiga Kirips, which means you are most welcome to the land of Wiradjuri people today. Welcome people, welcome friends. I'd also like to say Nungodjin because it means a lot for me to be able to come out and represent Mob and welcome everyone to country this afternoon. So again, I hope you all have a wonderful night, and I've got to take off actually because I got to get my son from daycare now. But I just want to say thank you again. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much, Swain, for that wonderful, warm and very generous welcome to country. Thanks also to all our members and supporters for joining us, and thank you for your loyal and generous support, which is vital to our work protecting nature and protecting national parks together. The meeting agenda has been made available by email and is also on our website, and it's being shared in chat for the Zoom folk on Zoom. The schedule for tonight is as follows. First up is our guest speaker, Richard Swain. Then we'll be hearing from our Executive Director, Matt. Then our Community Learning and Engagement Manager, Caitlin. Then we have a video presentation from our Nature Watch Manager, Sarah. And finally, the formal part of the AGM. We plan to finish around 8:45. So I'd now like to introduce our guest speaker. Richard Swain is a Wiradjuri man who grew up in the Snowy Mountains with a strong connection to country. Richard is an Honorary Associate Professor at the Fenner School of Environment and Society, ANU College of Science, and an Ambassador for the Invasive Species Council. Richard's also worked as a river guide for 30 years in the Kosciuszko National Park. Richard will speak on working towards healing country, perspectives on opportunities for Indigenous management of feral species and protected areas. Please join me in welcoming Richard.
Yep. Hello, everyone. I always appreciate a good welcome to country, and it matters. We've got to acknowledge how many thousands of generations of custodianship happened in this country, and historically we may have lost some megafauna and things when the dingo came, but nothing compared to the last 236 years, and it's a reminder. It shouldn't divide Australians. It should make modern Australians want to fulfil their responsibility of custodianship. We can't rewrite history; it's written, and but we can make our future where what's happened now and who we are now as we fulfil our responsibility of custodianship. So on that line, I'd like to thank the NPA, Vnpa. I've had awesome dealings with the ACT NPA. They helped us start Reclaim Kosci to fight against the feral horses in Kosciuszko National Park. But without national parks, what would the country be? If I have an intimate knowledge of Kosciuszko and how it came about and the story, but if it wasn't for good people fighting the good fight 75 years ago, there would be lodges on top of Kosciuszko. There'd be lodges on Carruthers, Townsend. A view like that wouldn't look like. Oh. Better get rid of that one. I think I'll click that one. Yeah, a view like we saw wouldn't look like that, and that's thanks to good people. And so, I thank you for the work you put in, and for being members of an organisation like the National Parks Association of Victoria. But I would like to say, each photo is going to set me on a ramble. I don't prepare my talks. For thousands of generations in winter, the high country was Yukambra the crow and Kurakarai the wind spirit, and it's a playground. It has been a playground for the last 50 years. It became a grazing playground, and now it's a skiing, hiking playground. And now that's okay, but Australia, our culture doesn't respect country. We can buy outdoor camping gear and we can go to the highest points, but was there any code of practice there? Was there any law? Was there an obligation when you bought the gear that's going to take you to these places about respect, about respect for country? And that's missing, and it's our culture. It's modern Australia's culture that's killing country. It's nothing else. If it wasn't in our culture to kill our rivers, we wouldn't be. If it wasn't in our culture to kill the barrier reef, we quite simply would not be. And so it's that culture that we've always missed the point for 236 years. We've missed too many of the responsibilities, the things that the thousands of generations that came before us were given. So, to go into the high country, like above the tree line, that's proper way, that's proper law country. That you had to go through a lot of ceremony and a lot of respect law before you did that. And the last recently, our modern history doesn't have that, and it's to our detriment that we don't respect country the way we should. And if we can change our culture to one that respects country, we'll be far better off. We've missed the boat too many times on what we could have changed. I'll see what the next photo is. Aha. So some people will argue that the worst feral animal that ever came to Australia was the rabbit. For me, it's the sheep. You wouldn't have needed fences for rabbits. You wouldn't have needed to massacre my great-great-grandparents. You wouldn't have needed to cut down all the trees. There wouldn't be a small percentage of the population got wealthy on them. They'd be far more equitable for people. And that's not acknowledged in our country, what the agricultural industry has done to our country. The mining industry would have to fulfil their wish list for the next 50 years to even try and catch up to agriculture, for the worst thing to ever happen to this country. And a lot of our national parks, which you people help save, they're not national parks because Australia cared. They're national parks because they're too rugged to farm. And so they're now our refugee camps, really important. And while mob have been hurting and been mistreated in this country, good people have helped save country. So we have parks where some of our species still exist. Good historians held a lot of our history. Anthropologists held a lot of our language. So there's always been good people, but currently our country is a democratic idiocracy, and if we're not strategising the idiocracy, then we're not going to save enough country. So unfortunately our parks aren't genetically linked. I hope the treaty can be about country, not people. If treaty in Victoria can be a code of ethics of how to live upon the land, then we've done something good for country. If treaty's about mob, who wears the possum skin cloak, who signs on the line, then we've failed country. If we just have isolated national parks here, there and everywhere, and treaty couldn't deliver the pathways of connectivity, so like our waterways are our capillaries, our veins, our arteries of country, and we need them back to relink the isolated pockets that haven't been destroyed. And it's time that the agricultural industry fence their stock in and let our wildlife live and stop poisoning dingoes and stop sending things extinct. They've done enough. And I know they got very wealthy off our country, and I know they're going to want us to pay for them to fence off the creeks, but if that's the case, it's worth it. If that's what we have to do for them, then we will. But they need to be embarrassed and shamed into doing the right thing for once. Don't know what happened. Yeah. So Australia was a soft country. We've probably all heard it's hard out here on the land. It wasn't hard, and a lot of the land is that destroyed that there's hardly a cattle or a cow or a sheep on it anymore. There's just goats and camels, and we lost a lot of country. We lost a lot of soft country. We lost a lot of our sponge. If you want the history of Australia, and I was to dress up as Professor Sumner Miller, I'd get a sponge, cut it the shape of Australia, fill it with beautiful spring water, and then I'd get a sheep hock and a horse's hoof and a cow, and I would bash it. And then I'd hit it with a blowtorch, and then I would bash it again and hit it with a blowtorch. And I'd do that 3 or 4 times. And then I would have given the class a really good lesson of colonial history of Australia. Because Australia was a soft, beautiful place that the species here, the plants and the animals, they evolved here together. And people, doesn't matter what your genetics, people are dangerous to the planet. And the different culture with mob and modern Australia was that mob knew that, and mob respected that, and mob behaved accordingly. And unfortunately, we haven't done that. So, you know, I'm from the Snowy Mountains, and they dammed 12 major rivers and 76 creeks. They didn't put a fishway in it. And it's celebrated as one of our finest achievements. It's called renewable energy now, and the rivers, they actually took to the rivers like farmers take to a brown snake. They cut the head off them, and there's no truth. I live in a community around Cooma that no one up the street would even know what the Snowy scheme actually did to our waterways. And that's our shame. That's where we've gone wrong. The Snowy River, what it was to what it is now, and what's happening, because of the changed hydrology and climate change, we'll probably lose all the snow gums. They look like they're on their way out. So that's the Injagubbi dreaming. That's a really old dreaming story. But there's good people. They're working on it. And but what we're lacking is the political will, but it's social licence. So we won the social licence to aerially cull horses. That's been our biggest win. And we just need to keep capitalising on on those wins. But while ever it's modern Australia's culture that's killing country, then that's what we need to change. So all the workers that came to the Snowy, they all immigrated, and then they took citizenship. Well, the one thing they weren't asked to do when they took citizenship was to pick up a handful of the Australian soil and commit to the responsibility of custodianship. Now, the reason they weren't asked to do that is Australians don't even expect that of themselves. So they were expected to learn Bradman's average, and they were expected to wave their colonial flag and do all the things that Australians expect. But country was not part of that ceremony. We can't even have a ceremony where we invite people to live in this nation amongst us, where we respect country. But that's a sad state of affairs. Yeah, so feral animals. We've got the highest mammalian extinction rate in the world. I think we've had 23 extinctions in my lifetime. We've locked in plenty more. The deer problem, particularly in Victoria, is because you have people who don't want their hobby disrupted. So you're actually doing that to your sphagnum bogs, etc., because of people's hobby. End of story. It's not because we need a deer to do it. There's a fear that people think it's a resource, that's a real problem we have. There's also the animal justice people who put in place their emotions on something instead of looking at it through country's lens. So if we were all able to look at it from country, looking back at the problem, we would have the ability to do what we could to get rid of those animals. It's just something you have to rationalise. You have to see it from country's point of view. You have to see it from the critically endangered species point of view, what it needs you to do. And being human is a huge responsibility. That's just how it is. So I'm sure if I asked the MCG crowd if they all love the place, they'd all love the place, yeah mate. But if I asked them who could point to a square inch of this place that would love them, the crowd would go silent. And then within a few minutes they'd get angry. And that's our culture, that's what we're doing to country. We'll see what our next one is. Or have I done it? Did I do them? Yeah. So the three hottest fires in the mountains, in the high country, have all been since colonisation. So the areas that run through into Victoria, the lower Snowy, the peak erosion in there was between 1830 and 1870. We lost a foot of soil, and that country being a rain shadow, but Uncle Snappy always says, except when it rains. But that country being a rain shadow, the recovery is so slow, so slow. Like it's a living museum. There's the pre-colonial forest and the post-colonial forest all there. So that country's got a huge story to tell. There's the dying river flowing through the middle. But there's probably 10 times or 20 times, I don't know how many more times trees there are now than there would have been. The grassland eroded. So that country's a little bit like a scab on a graze. It's going to take centuries to heal. So it's been a national park for the New South Wales side for 50 years. And 30 years ago, the biggest consumer of the environment down there by scat was rabbits, followed by native animals, followed by horses were very low and deer were non-existent. and today the biggest consumer of that environment, whilst it's a national park, is horses by a long shot, followed by deer. Rabbits, I think, now have taken over come back with our natives, and so our natives are running dead last in that part of the national park. The Kurrajong trees, which is what our people made string and rope and everything, there's the ones that were pre-colonial, there's the ones that might have got through with myxomatosis, then the ones that might have got through on Khaleesi, but otherwise it's devoid of saplings. So we need NPAs to lobby to keep parks going. I mean, the people that work in the national park are trying to do the right thing, but are they funded? Do they have the will? Do they have the culture? They have to. Last year I finally got through 100 kilometres of the Snowy River through Kosciuszko National Park, killing the willows. It took me 8 years of lobbying, and then I finally got rangers who'd ring me up 3 days before the financial year and say, "Oh, can you write me a bill for 10 or 20,000?" And then we would spend it that year on willow control. But you would think keeping that river clean of willows through the national park would just be an automatic. It would be a culturally acceptable, appropriate, shouldn't even need spare budget to do that. It should just be part of what we do and how we live. So, yeah, it's our culture. So anything you can do to change Australia's culture, let's do it. We need Australians to get to know all the things they've sent extinct. We need sports teams to give totems out. We need whatever changes culture to happen. It's in this day and age, if whatever we're trying to save, whatever we're trying to do, if we're not strategising the idiocracy, then we're going to fail country, because that's the social licence our politicians need, and that's the cultural change our country needs. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Richard. Please accept this gift with our many, many thanks for travelling down from your country to join us today. Your words were very thought-provoking and such an important reminder to us of our priorities. I think they'll keep us all thinking for a long time after those words. Thank you so much. I'd now like to introduce our Executive Director, Matt Ruckle.
Thanks, John. How's that? That's pretty good. So click the phone off. Thank you. Right. Thanks, everybody. Great to see such a good turnout as always. I'll try not to click the wrong button on the clicker. It's been another fantastic year, of course, for the Vnpa. We always keep very busy, but it's our members and supporters, you guys, who are crucial to delivering our vision for Victoria as a place with a diverse, healthy, natural environment, protected and respected and enjoyed by all. I'd like to thank our council members, volunteers, partners, staff for their dedication and hard work. Thanks to both council members, but also the committee members, and also them who are all volunteers, and they do a really important job, both in terms of governance, strategy, and also work on a heap of issues to keep our association healthy. Also, we should thank our very hard-working staff. There's a few people who have moved on to other things. Consuelo, who was our dedicated next-gen nature convener, has taken up a further study opportunity, so we wish her well. Also Amelia Esterdale, who was from our fundraising team, who finished up after 7 years at the Vnpa, so we wish her well as well. And this year we've taken on some new staff, so Brendan Kelly, important role of Finance and Operations Manager, and Nicole Mertens has returned to Vnpa as the Nature Stewards Coordinator, whilst Maddie is on parental leave. And Matt Small has joined the fundraising team, and Michael Liu, who you might have met out the front, as the new Next Gen Coordinator. So I'm just going to run through some highlights of the year. Hope the clicker works. There we go. Here's some highlights, and I'll talk a bit more about some of these, but I think we can all be very happy to see the official end of Vic Forests, which we saw both the official end of logging in the east of the state, but also in the west of the state. And we had to push that one a bit to make sure it was aligned with the east, and importantly, the repeal of some of the key enabling legislation just in June this year. And you'll find out a bit more later from Caitlin's talk, we're aligning Nature Watch into much more advocacy space. Shout out to Shannon, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, who produced a fantastic report on the winds of change, and it's an important report on trees that's been run by Jordan. We also made some very good progress on the Western Port Woodlands, which is sort of one of our under the radar campaigns, if you like. The Victorian government finally recognising it of having national significance after the department telling us for many years that it wasn't important, but there's still much more work to do there. So the Protecting Our Living Legacies report, so Jordan put a heap of work into this, and this was really about ensuring those really big trees and significant trees on public land are properly protected. So he drew on his past as an arborist and harvested a heap of information input from experts right across that field. We're continuing to push that work into government. Holden Proving Ground, as you can see, Sarah Blair in the wild. An amazing site. This is part of the Western Port Woodlands corridor. And we've managed to get access, which was really important, and there'll be more to say about this over the coming years. We've been pushing the government to purchase the site for conservation, or at least part of it. Not a lot of interest so far, but it's been fenced for a long time, so it's a critically important piece of the puzzle in that area. Some amazing diversity of species in that site. In the Central Highlands, early in the year, we nominated the Mount Donabuang wingless stonefly, who only lives in a sort of 6 kilometre square zone on the top of Mount Donabuang as a critical habitat determination. We'd actually lodged the thing called the critical habitat determination, which is a tool under our threatened species laws at a state level. The Scientific Advisory Committee agreed, referred it to DECA, who declined. We were very disappointed. It only lives in a square kilometre. Disappointed. There's a heap of work, I suppose, with the end of native forest logging around what is the future of the forests, and so there was a whole lot of tools and submissions and community workshops around the Central Highlands and the Great Forest National Park. So a heap of work in there. We're expecting the report from the eminent panel on what the future of those forests are. We know it's been given to the government, but it hasn't yet been released. And of course, fuel breaks and various other loophole logging exercises, which I'll talk a little bit more about. This is the beautiful Central Yarra Ranges National Park. So loophole logging. So a lot of our work's been about trying to bed down. So the end of logging was great, but we wanted to bed it down so it doesn't come back. It's not always easy to do. So there's a whole lot of loopholes in this. The first was the West. The second one we've discovered is the fire breaks thing. So with the emergence of or the exit of the logging industry, a large proportion of forest contractors have gone across to forest fire management. Forest fire management largely have no oversight, and so working a lot of detail around the Yarra Ranges, Dandenong Ranges, trying to mitigate the impacts of storm cleanup. We've also seen the emergence of this private land logging. So the logging industry is stubborn and persistent, and we know that they see a strategy if they can log private land, and there is more than you think, they can keep going until there's a change of government and it'll all be back sweet. So this is quite a complicated issue, but we're finding numerous examples of it, of sawmills buying land and using loopholes in our planning scheme laws to actually log it. And the other sort of emergent is this storm recovery idea. So if a tree falls in a forest, we should be able to use it for saw log. So this has been a really hectic issue, particularly in Wombat and Cobble forests, and a huge amount of work from people like Ben Gill and volunteers and Nature Watch teams checking on what's going on the ground. And you can see this private land logging pretty much looks like public land logging did. So that's one we're going to chase down over the next year. And you can see in the sort of fire breaks works, the size of the trees that are being cleared for fire purposes. There's different strategies. There's a whole level of assessment that needs to be done that hasn't been done. And Blake and Jordan and others have done heaps of work on documenting that. But it's spreading. The loopholes, there's a lot. There's storm ones, there's private land ones, there's forest fire management ones, so our work's not quite complete there. The big push in this space, and I think it'll be a hard one, is to get better oversight for forest fire management. We've got a conservation regulator that sort of sits there that was set up to monitor commercial forestry. Those rules don't apply to the government's own department. The government ministers' offices tell me that the regulator can't oversight themselves, and so all you've got is an agency that marks its own homework. So we're pushing for this greater oversight. This will be a hard campaign. We've done a lot of work with the media, a lot of field work. We're pushing stuff fairly hard to politicians, and of course the very sad example of we told forest fire management, a week or so before on numerous occasions that gliders that had been identified in trees, and then we discovered a dead one basically from a tree that had been felled. So some fantastic work there from Blake and Jordan and allies like the Watch team of the Central Highlands. The other key piece of work, of course, Vnpa, always persistent, and keeping up the pressure on creating the Central West Parks. So this has been going since 2017. We've had a Victorian Environmental Assessment Council process. We've had constant delays. So we continue to work with Wombat Forest Care. We've identified new species in the wombat, mountain skinks, phascogales, a whole lot of stuff. We had this sort of rogue big forest operation start up just at the end. That was closed down with the end of forestry, but it was essentially replaced with a forest fire management regime of cleaning out the storm debris, some of it still being sent off for commercial use. We also had a very nasty fire at Mount Cole in February this year, which was one of the Central West Parks. And we were very worried about the Mount Cole grevillea, which only occurs at Mount Cole, not particularly likes fire much, but we've managed to get some dedicated funding there, and I think in the last week or so we've just discovered grevillea pups coming up out there, so we just need to get those fenced off so they don't get eaten by deer or something else. And of course Wellsford, working with the Bendigo groups to tackle legal firewood and mountain bike trail creation up there. Sorry, I should have moved that. Anyway, so that's those three. But importantly, in the last week, after a radio interview that Ben Gill did, the government's been saying that they're looking at the second half of the year, and all in good time, the Central West Parks will be legislated after being the slowest creation of a national park since it being promised to being legislated of any government in the last 25 years. The government has said that they will legislate them in November this year. And it's the first public statement in the media that they've said that, so we need to just make sure we hold them to that. There's 10 sitting days left, so that's an important thing to hopefully happen in the next couple of weeks or next month. Thinking about a marine space, continuing to keep up the fight there. Vnpa, of course, the only statewide organisation working on marine issues, and some key work there led by Shannon, who's been doing a great job. A very influential report, The Winds of Change, looking at the offshore renewable energy industry. Obviously, we're not opposed to that, but we want it to be planned properly to avoid the mistakes of many other industries, and that nature is assessed and put central to decision making about renewable energy offshore. Continuing to push the government on the Western Port Bay framework, which is a sort of an innovative thing to try and set up Western Port to be protected from future dumb ideas and industrial developments, and we're making good progress with that. Lots of solid media coverage around rejection of Port and Hastings as the wind home, huge community collaboration, lots of support from councils and the community down there, and some great work in increasing the protection of our big blue backyard. Moving on to, oh, did I go too far? Oops, I did, sorry. Where have I gone? Other way? Ah, there we go, spoiler story. Grasslands, of course. So the other piece of our work, Grassy Plains Networks now, sort of was always supported by Vnpa and hosted by Vnpa in partnership with IFA, but IFA has now dissolved, and so the Grassy Plains Network's now solidly part of Vnpa. And Adrian has been doing some fantastic work along with the network in guarding our grasslands, looking at legless lizard and golden sun moth habitat protection, doing community education with non-English speaking and culturally and linguistically diverse communities, looking at infrastructure projects like gas hubs and pipelines and freight hubs, and in very strategic and community initiative, the People's Audit of Promised Reserves, gained front page coverage in The Age, and hundreds, if not well, dozens anyway, of workshops, monthly grassy talks, and tours. Well, they seem like hundreds. Adrian's very busy, supported by a great, passionate grassland community. So, great front page there, getting grasslands on the front page. And then, of course, so there have been some key things, but we always keep ourselves busy. Western Port woodlands, strengthening state and federal nature laws. There's a lot of work on the fed front, but also state, controlling feral species, putting out a letter from 100 different groups in the last week or so, calling for more deer control and listing of deer as a pest or feral species. Some important work around dingoes. So there's been some progress in the west of the state, but the government then sort of botched a decision around dingoes in the east. And of course, the endless grind of defending our parks from stupid ideas. tourism developments, poor decisions, pushing for better funding, and so on. So a really successful year in all, but the challenges never stop. So again, probably summarising the true end to native forest logging, loopholes, completing the Central West National Parks. It'd be great to get a commitment to the Great Forest National Park. It's only been going a decade or so. There's a process happening around East Gippsland. We met with the Great Outdoors Task Force yesterday. I did say they needed to watch their abbreviation because people could get confused with the Game of Thrones, but it wasn't as bad as the Red Wedding. Though they weren't particularly enthused about parks. So there is these promises and these processes, but there's not a lot of ambition from the government, so our work's fairly well cut out for that. Of course, continued work on the grasslands and Western Port and offshore planning. But it's important, and it's because of you and your support that we've made progress on these issues and protection and defence right across Victoria. So thank you for those things. I just want to also take a moment to acknowledge those people we've lost over the last year. Just quickly, Michael, of course, and we'll talk a little bit about him later, but also Bob Steed, Walt Tyers, and Alan Hall and Betty Whitehead. And these two were particularly important because they left us very significant bequests, which will be really critical both now and into the future to support our work. So thank you for those people who have now passed. Now I'll hand over to Caitlin.
Thank you so much, Matt. I'd like to introduce Caitlin Griffith, our Community Learning and Engagement Manager, to give us an update.
Thanks, Jane. Yeah, I think that's good. Thank you. All right, so lovely to see you all out this evening, and thanks, Richard, for a wonderful keynote. So our community learning and engagement programs, we have 6 quite diverse programs, and hopefully many of you have been involved in those programs over the years, and if not, I strongly encourage you to go and have a look at the activities calendar to see all the different opportunities available for you to get out into nature and enjoy nature with us, because while we do stand up for nature, sometimes I like to tell people we also stand in nature, but I was told that was a bit boring, and we probably needs a better tagline than that. But we do spend a lot of time in and enjoying and connecting with nature, and balance and bringing together all of those things: standing up for nature, caring for nature, learning about nature, connecting with nature, enjoying nature, and really bringing those things all together. And I think we do that really well as an organisation. So today I'm just going to share a very brief highlight from each of our different programs over the past year or so, and then Sarah Blair, who's actually luckily for her, unluckily for us, in Canada at the moment, has prepared a video for us on a very significant project that she has ran in East Gippsland over a number of years. So we're just going to have a bit of a deep dive into Nature Watch this year and this particular project, so that'll be coming through to us as a video. I also want to give a huge thanks to and a big shout out to all the hardworking staff, volunteers who make these programs happen, and to all of you for the support that makes it possible for us to reach a lot of people over the year and get people out into nature. All right, so our Next Gen Nature program, which is led by young adults and for young adults, and Michael's here. Where are you, Michael? somewhere. There he is, right up the back. So we've had, that program's a fairly new program with the Vnpa, and we began that program because we realised there was quite a gap in engaging with younger adults, and it's been slowly building over the last few years. And one of the highlights over the past year was a trip that you can see Jordan there and Consuelo, who is in the bright blue. They organised a trip together out to Western Port Woodlands, where they didn't just go and have a look at the woodlands. They did have a look and they got to experience the Western Port Woodlands and what was wonderful about them, but they also got to hear a lot about campaign techniques and what the campaign has involved. So there was a lot of real learning for that group on that particular field trip, and it was definitely a highlight. There's been a few trips like that for the Next Gen Nature crew over the past 12 months or so. And so this is just a quote from one of our participants. I learnt a lot about how to structure a campaign and how it can look realistically. I also got to explore an area I wouldn't normally go to and learn a lot more about it. So, these are really great opportunities for people to interact, learn, and, really get into these places and to really engage and meet a lot of other young adults who are really into nature conservation as well. So our Nature Stewards program has been continuing to really reach a whole lot of new people. We had a record number of 186 participants go through the Nature Stewards course. So this is a roughly 10-week course that people go through. It's run in partnership with local councils, and it's really like a Nature 101, like a beginner's nature course. And so it's so record number of participants this year, run at locations across the state, and just some of the exciting impacts that we've seen on participants or the way they've implemented their learning that we've been really excited to see. A lot of them have joined their local community nature conservation groups. They've joined Vnpa. There's a couple of people who've put their hand up to run for local council to, hopefully get that local council thinking a lot more about nature at a governance level. People have been creating art and integrating it into their daily lives as well. So that's been really exciting. So our Reef Watch program, we did just want to highlight this young girl. So Reef Watch has over 1,000 participants every year, and a whole lot of people engage with a range of different projects on the Reef Watch program. There's a sea slug census, there's a Great Victorian Fish Count, but this girl here, Eva, she participates on every single Reef Watch project. And she does that through her homeschooling program, and she's participated so much that Cade, who is the Reef Watch coordinator, actually turns to her now for help with ID when they're out and about. So, these programs can have significant impact on the people who are participating in them, and it's really exciting to see what Eva's achieved. Another significant win for the Reef Watch program over the last year or so is on this project called the Undaria project, and they're removing a lot of algal weeds. And this is a highly significant weed species in the marine environment, which a lot of people aren't aware of. It is listed as a very significant weed species by the IUCN, and also listed as a very significant weed species in Australia as well, having a significant impact. So there's been 422 people have pulled out a mammoth 11,767 wakame, so a huge amount. And what tends to actually happen with it is that it gets put on people's gardens. So it's actually quite good for their gardens as well. So it also doesn't produce a lot of waste once it's pulled out. And so moving on. So our Wild Families program, we've had 5 quite diverse activities for families to get involved in nature conservation and nature-based activities. We've had things like nest box building activities, they've been out fish counting, they've been bird watching, so we've had a whole range of great opportunities for families to get involved in nature with us as well. And the bushwalking program, over the past year or so, we've had 170 people taking part. We've had 12 volunteer leaders submitting activities, and there've been about 19 quite diverse activities. Again, everything from bird watching, base camp, wildflower wandering. So a whole lot of different activities. And we are keen for some more leaders. Our bushwalking activities are actually very popular on our activities calendar, and so we are on the lookout for some more leaders to help us continue to build that program back up again. So we're going to have a look at this video from Sarah on life after fire. And for those who are watching online, the strength of your internet connection or your bandwidth might impact the playback of this. We hope it works okay for you. The video is about 10 minutes long, so don't go away if you are watching us online. But that's it from me, so thank you very much. I'm going to pop the video on and hopefully you get to enjoy this deep dive into the Nature Watch program. Oh, we're going.
Hi everyone, Sarah Blair from the Nature Watch program here. I was hoping to present to you today at the AGM about our Life After Fire program. I'm actually in Canada right now visiting family on a very important holiday, so I have pre-recorded a presentation for you and I hope you enjoy it. Life After Fire and beyond. I started the Life After Fire project in 2021 as a response to the 2019-2020 Black Summer bushfires in East Gippsland. The fires are really extensive, burning over 800,000 hectares across all land tenures, all the way from the coast right up into the mountains. The aims of the project were to help monitor wildlife recovery and to help inform nature conservation policy and practice moving forward with really scientifically robust wildlife monitoring in those bushfire impacted regions. We worked in partnership with many different community groups, scientists, land managers, and we really tried to empower and equip community members with awareness and skills to help them also contribute to post-bushfire recovery and ongoing citizen science monitoring. The project rolled out in a couple of different ways. We first got a grant from Landcare Australia called the Wildlife Relief and Recovery Grant, and that was a one-year project supporting private landowners to monitor wildlife presence and post-fire recovery on their properties. And then coming into the second year, we got a really generous grant from the Helen McPherson Smith Trust, one of their impact grants, and that was a 3-year project grant that allowed us to do really extensive monitoring on public land. Those are the little red dots that you see in a series. And then in the third year, we also got another grant to do work on private land, and that was the Landcare-led Bushfire Recovery Grant. That was also training private landowners in wildfire recovery actions and also helping help them get some tree planting and some nest boxes sorted. In 2021, we worked with 5 different landowners in the areas around Clifton Creek, which is north of Bairnsdale, and Goongerah, which is north of Orbost near Erinander National Park. We worked with them to do wildlife surveys on their own properties, so we provided equipment and training, primarily the wildlife cameras and the audio recorders. We did the data analysis and the reporting for them and recorded all of their findings with the Victorian Biodiversity Atlas. It was fantastic to work with these people who knew so much about their properties before the fires and now really wanted to know what wildlife was like after the fires. And we saw some really interesting things happen, like large stands of Calameria amaranthoides, which is that plant on the right the gentleman is walking through, which grew up incredibly fast and very, very tall, and over a period of a couple of years then flowered profusely, dropped its seed, and then began to recede again because it's stimulated by the fire, and it's only seen after fire, so it really changed the landscape for a while. And on one property we built a bandicoot bungalow, so a structure made out of a hardwood pallet and logs and sticks and branches and grass and all sorts of good things to make a big sort of pile that hopefully would be some protective area for bandicoots to live under to stay away from predators like cats and foxes. We wanted to test and see if this is something that could be done after fires regularly to provide really inexpensive, quick habitat to keep predators away from them while they're trying to recover in the landscape. So we did this on one private property, and the landowner kindly kept updating the 4 different cameras that were recording on that bungalow, and it's still going now. And we know bandicoots do use it, but we know that there is one bush rat who seems to live in it. So he definitely holds on to it. But pretty exciting discovery and something that could be very useful in the future. When we started working on public land, I thought very carefully about what sites would we be going to, and we looked at some of the reports Vnpa had been involved in and state government departments, and what priority species there were that we might be able to help look for to see how they'd fared after the fires. This helped determine where we were going to go, what types of field work we needed to do, and then we also considered access challenges and safety issues. Clearly, the scope of this project was much larger than we usually do with Nature Watch, and so we had a lot to consider. How do we get enough wildlife monitoring done across such a large area? So I actually developed a new wildlife survey protocol for us, which involved us using 1 kilometer long sites along a track or a road. And we started at the first position where we put in a wildlife camera and we put an audio recorder for birds and frogs and things using a normal acoustic microphone. And we also did a photo point in that area. And then every 250 meters, we put another camera and did another photo point so we could record the vegetation recovering. We did that every 250 meters. And then at the end, we also added a bat audio meter. And so we could have an ultrasonic microphone to pick up bats. And then across the whole length of that 1 kilometer site, we walked it once to do tracks and scats and diggings surveys. And then we also walked it once doing evening spotlights to look for the nocturnal animals. This was a really challenging project, but it was pretty exciting as well, and we achieved some amazing things over the 3 years. We were able to get into the field on 13 of our 15 planned field expeditions. Some were rescheduled many times due to storms and due to COVID lockdowns, and actually twice while we were in the field, COVID lockdowns were called and we had to quickly do our field work and then rush back. We managed to survey 26 of the 30 planned research sites, so that was a fantastic achievement. We were able to put 130 wildlife cameras out in the field, 52 audio recorders. We did 23 kilometers of scat, track, and digging surveys, and we also did 22 kilometers of nighttime spotlighting surveys. So you can see some of the photos, some of the wonderful animals we picked up on our cameras, and we also had some fantastic ones through the spotlighting. By the end of it all, we had analyzed 26,754 wildlife photos. We recorded 22 different native mammals, 29 species of native birds, 3 species of native reptiles, 9 species of introduced animals like foxes, deer, cats, rabbits, etc. The key to a successful project like this is to have really intrepid volunteers. We worked in remote areas, we were camping together, we were out for 3 days at a time. And we really need people who knew how to look after themselves and were very comfortable in remote areas and didn't mind a leech or two as well. Some of the main takeaways from this project was we were able to get out there and go to the areas that really needed us to look at them, those high conservation value areas. So that was pretty exciting. We were able to influence some conservation actions like recording greater gliders and notifying the department of that so that they wouldn't log those areas. We built up great relationships with the DELP and now DECA people, Parks Victoria, some local groups, and those landowners was amazing. And it was just amazing to get to know some of those Nature Watch volunteers who brought along all their own expertise in birds, plants, orchids, fungi, everything. So we all learned so much while we were out there, and we really enjoyed doing it as well. And now we know a lot more about doing research in fire recovery landscapes, which is something we'll probably be doing more and more. And I have to do a shout out to our field officer, Rachel, who came on for 3 years for this project and was an amazing help. It's not the sort of project we could have done with just me, so that was amazing. Beyond Life After Fire, Nature Watch is now moving closer to Vnpa's campaigns, and I have been working closely with our campaigners to develop projects that will help in the short term where immediate needs are to help save areas of habitat or wildlife, particularly threatened species. We have worked in wombat forests, saving brush-tailed phascogales from fuel reduction burning. I've been part of a small group allowed into the Holden Proving Grounds to do wildlife surveys, and that's part of our Western Port Woodlands program. It's a really integral part of the habitat down there that we're really hoping to save. And I have restarted our Great Forest Guardians program, where we are surveying wildlife and also habitat potential right across areas within the proposed Great Forest National Park. It has been fantastic working with the campaigners so quickly and finding new ways to get wildlife information out very fast so that we can actually have an influence on a much shorter time scale on how land is being managed. And I really look forward to telling you how those projects are going over the next year, and come on out and get involved with our citizen science and volunteer on an H-Watch project if you like. And I'd love to show it to you in the field. So I will keep in touch, and I have a great AGM.
Yeah, thanks, Jane, and thanks, David. This is an interesting activity for us tonight, because the first citations for the late Michael Feller, who for many decades was heavily involved in protecting forests and rivers through his research, through lobbying, through his educational activities, and he engaged many people with the outdoors and on Vnpa committees. So I'm just going to very quickly summarise some of the things that we're remembering Michael for tonight. And I'd certainly like to mention that some of Michael's family is here with us tonight, and thank you very much for being present. Michael was a very keen bushwalker, a mountain climber, and he loved skiing and kayaking. He made huge contributions to the Vnpa and Victoria's natural areas, even though he spent a large chunk of his career working in Canada. The horrors of the Australian forestry practice, the misrepresentation of such devastation as scientific forestry, and Michael's deep love of forest environment fuelled in him a strong sense of moral indignation and outrage that drove him to work many demanding and often long hours on a large number of projects on behalf of the forests that he loved. Michael was very persistent in his advocacy, and the special places that he loved, he was an absolute demon. He was a member of the Vnpa and a supporter since 1976, and he supported and contributed to many campaigns over the years in drives for new national parks, such as the Alps, the Otway Ranges, and the endless forestry wars. Michael was an academic of the highest integrity. Nothing for Michael was ever guessed, was never woolly, or was never estimated. In a world of compromised studies, purchased opinion pieces, and self-serving endorsements of conveniently selected evidence, Michael was a rock-solid, staunchly committed to the scientific truth, and just nobody was going to sweet-talk Michael into a position that he had not verified. And those of us who know Michael well, certainly on the Vnpa committees, knew that Michael would ask countless questions to uncover every skerrick of evidence. And from 2013, after he returned to live in Victoria full-time, he applied all of his skills at the Vnpa Conservation and Campaigns Committee, of which he was convener for some years, and on the Vnpa Council, and to conservation policy development within the Vnpa, and he was involved in campaign strategies and budgets alike. So all of those things I just mentioned, Michael's intellect and his determination and his questioning were exhibited. He also represented the Vnpa on the Parks Victoria Falls to Hotham Track Stakeholder Committee. During his life, Michael was a generous teacher. He was a mentor to many students and those in the forest conservation movement, and he spent much time explaining forest ecology to many people with his patience and gentleness. For many years, Michael was the go-to person on forest and fire knowledge, and his passion meant long hours for long periods. He was a true forest activist and a scientific source, as well as a gentle person. For his selfless dedication to the Vnpa and to protecting nature in Victoria, we honour the late Michael Feller. The second citation is for Evelyn Feller. Evelyn has been a person who has been engaging people with nature through the bushwalking leadership, research and education activities on various Vnpa committees for over a decade. And it's very difficult to summarise her input here tonight. She's been a bushwalking leader with the Vnpa, and in 2013 first led a walk to Mount St Leonard's, and has since led a diversity of walks for members and supporters alike. This included leading a 2-week hiking trip in Canada with her husband Michael, and that was apparently an incredible trip with a lot of insights from people who'd lived there for a long time. One of Evelyn's favourite places for leading walks is the Cathedral Ranges in Victoria. She recently played a very significant role in the refreshing of the bushwalking program through providing important feedback, engaging with previous bushwalking leaders, and stepping up and leading many walks, and demonstrated that there's still strong support for the bushwalking program within the Vnpa. Evelyn has provided her extensive outdoor education and teaching skills to the Vnpa as a volunteer researcher, contributing to committees in different ways, and in providing feedback and reviews for the Nature Watch and the Reef Watch programs. And that's no easy task because they are big reports. She was also pivotal in writing articles on the 2013 Vnpa Nature Conservation Review, so that readers of Parkwatch were provided with clear summaries of that massive report. Evelyn has contributed to many educational activities, including activities for high school students, wild families, and a leadership role at large Vnpa events, including our picnics and other events such as Nature Watch, citizen science programs, and really enjoyed the Shine a Light campaign at Wilson's Prom in 2013. Evelyn has also done the hard yards by contributing to Vnpa committee governance. In 2011, she brought her skills in outdoor education and teaching to the, and wait for it, to the Marketing, Community Engagement, Education and Events Committee, where she was an active contributor until the committees were restructured in 2022, when she joined the Bushwalking Program Committee, where she's an ongoing contributor. For your selfless dedication to the Vnpa and in the protection of nature in Victoria, we honour Evelyn Feller.
Readjustment of the mic. Okay. Actually, I'm very touched by the photo because Michael's favourite bird, it was the crimson rosella, and he just loved seeing them on our property, and I love still to see them every day there. But anyway, just a few words. I know that he would have felt very, very honoured by this recognition of his time with and work with the Vnpa. He valued being a member, and as was said, he had been a member since about 1976, and he was involved then with the massive fight for the Alpine National Park and worked with Vnpa people like Dick Johnson and many other stalwarts. He remained a member while he was in Canada and felt it was important to keep up with the issues here. And occasionally he did actually do submissions on various park issues. He valued working with people like Matt, Phil Inglemells, Bruce McGregor, Gerard McPhee, and the many others he worked with on various committees. He was very impressed with the work of newer members like Sarah, Shannon, Caitlin, Blake, and Jordan. He was honoured to speak at the Vnpa-sponsored conference last year about the future of the forests and the parks. He was still wanting to be a very active part with the Vnpa, and that sadly was cut short. For myself, I'm a little bit overwhelmed to be included in this award. Last Wednesday, I watched the wonderful webinar on Western Port that was attended by over 500 people and felt very proud to be part of this organisation. It was a privilege to work with people like Phil Inglemells doing research and helping him design the demonstration on the prom, and Donna Buang. It was a wonderful experience at the prom, seeing the words "Hands Off Parks" illuminated by people's torches at dusk on Norman Beach. It was magical. Leading the bushwalks was a great way to meet some good people and share knowledge of the wonderful environment we were experiencing. Hopefully it reinforced our determination to continue working to save it. So thank you very much, and much appreciated.
I'll be able to duck for the last bit. Yeah. Thank you, Bruce, and congratulations, Evelyn. That's the last item on the agenda is other business, and we don't have any. So that concludes our AGM. Thank you for your attendance tonight.
So thank you, David, and thanks again, everyone, for coming along tonight and for your wonderful support. Thank you to all those who joined us online. We hope you hung in there through to the end. It's a pleasure to again bring our community together in person and online to celebrate 72 years of protecting nature. Thank you so much. Safe trip home. Good night.